亲爱的观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看中华电视。今天我将带大家来到一个非常特别的西方家庭，谈一谈他们眼中的中华文化。
Hello, Katrina. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
2012年8月25日，这一天对于我来说是一个非常特别的日子。在中华电视摄影团队的带领下，我走进了澳洲本地的一个英国裔的家庭。与 Frank 和 Anne 的交谈给了我一个很好的机会，去学习和了解西方人眼中的中华传统文化。通过交谈，我发现 Frank 和 Anne 是一对非常友善的夫妇，而他们与中国的渊源也极为特殊。
I've heard you were born in China, is that true?
Yes, that's right. Quite a long time ago. I was born there it was 1942, so it was in the middle of the war. And I left there when I was 3. So I really don't remember much about China myself, but I grew up hearing stories of China and knowing a lot about China.
What is the thing that you like the most about China? Apart from Chinese food, because we know everyone like Chinese food.
Yes, Chinese food is lovely. But I love the heritage. I love the people. I didn't get to know them myself then, but I know my parents and my grandparents really loved the Chinese people, and some of their very best friends were the Chinese people they met there.
Are they born in China as well?
Yes, my parents both were born in China, and my grandmother on my father's side was born in China. So my great-grandfather went out there in 1876 from England, and my great-grandmother went out there soon afterwards from England, and they met out there. And there it all started, and on both sides as well.
So did you go back after you turned 3 years old?
I didn't go back until 2008. My father died in 2006, and he was born in China. He loved Shanxi, Taiyuan, where he was born. And somehow I didn't feel I should go back while he was alive. He couldn't. He was too old at that stage. And I just didn't feel it was right for me to go back. But once he died, he'd drawn me a map of where everything was. I knew all the history and the heritage, and I think he knew I would go back. And so in 2008, we both went and retraced the steps of my ancestors to see if there was anything still left. My grandfathers both were working in hospitals, one in Honan and one in Shanxi. And they were at schools. They started up schools and hospitals, churches in both those places. And I was amazed at how much we found that was still there. My great-grandfather went out as a missionary in 1976, and purely to hand out Bibles and tracts and preach. 1876.
1876.
And then it became obvious you can't do that for people that are starving. There was a drought from 1876 to 79, and millions of people died. And it's no good giving them tracts and things like that. And then they came and they taught at schools, they started hospitals, they did things rather than just preaching to people. And they also took what the Chinese people had, all the good that was in Buddhism, the good that was in Taoism, Confucianism, a lot of it was the same.
So there isn't much conflict?
Not a lot of conflict, no.
I've read a documentary before, like people were doing like this kind of stuff in China. The government is being harsh on them. So is there anything like that happened to your father, your parents, back then?
Well, they went through a very bad time during it was 1900 when there was the boxers.
Boxers.
Boxers came through China. They didn't want Christians there. They didn't want anyone there from overseas, and they killed all all the people from overseas in Shanxi and the people in Honan had a terrible time, and a lot of people were slaughtered at that stage. And after that, they understood that these Westerners had come to help them. And in spite of their families being killed, they came back again and started hospitals again and did things, and they did them because they wanted to help the Chinese people. And then they started
the relationship starting to change.
That's right. It changed, and then they really realised that, you know, that they could help, and they became good friends.
All based on love.
Exactly, exactly.
So, from your perspective of Chinese relationship and Australian, because now you live in Australia, in this society, how do you think of the relationship going on between those two different states?
I think it's very good. I think the Chinese and the Australians can mix very well. I think Chinese people are good for some of the Australians at school, because the school children work very hard and they want to work, and that's good because that brings up the whole ethos and standard of school, which is very good. And I think the people we find are very friendly, very easy to get on with, and there isn't anything bad.
Okay, speaking of education, there's a question I always want to ask about Westerners, because the world has been saying that Westerners are too soft with their kids and Chinese or Asian parents are harsh. I think there's a tiger mom called Amy Chua, like back in 2010. She's been really harsh on two of her daughters.
Yes.
How do you think of this kind of education method? Are you agree with it, or you have a different opinion? How about Frank? You start first.
I think in China it's very competitive. If you don't succeed, someone will climb over the top of you and get there instead. So everyone's very focused on succeeding, whereas in Australia we're very laid back. It's the lucky country, everything's here, beautiful climate and food and money and everything else.
Do you think there's a good sign of bringing that cultural mentality over Australia?
Well, I think so, because I think we've probably got a bit soft in some ways. Life's been too easy. We met some people, and one of our guides in China was a daughter of two professors, and she talked about her bringing up in high school, and she said it was hard work. She had to come home from school, work on Saturday, so she said it wasn't a lot of fun growing up as a teenager. So in some ways it can go a bit too far, but I think bringing the Chinese attitudes and industry and respect is very good. I think Chinese citizens are very respectful. They're not disrespectful of older people and others. I think that's something we can learn from, definitely.
So education and career is probably the family concern for like different countries. How about society-wise? Because when I first come to Australia, I saw a lot of like gay people, lesbians walking on the street holding hands, and that really shocked me in some way, because in China that's really rare. So I want to hear how a Westerner think this kind of situation happening.
Well, perhaps you should talk about this.
Well, we've
first.
we've been thinking about this a lot lately. I've joined a group, a sort of Christian group that's been very open to gay and lesbian people, because often they're excluded from mainstream churches and society, and I think that there's much more openness to people who are gay and lesbian. In fact, last weekend we were in Sydney, and I met a relative who I'd never met before, who was like a historian and into our family history, but he was gay, and he said he'd been like that since he was a child, and he always knew he was different, and he's grown up now, he's got a male partner. So it was obvious for someone like that, it was just something that he couldn't help, and which was very natural for him. So I think there are a lot of people like that. So I think if you have a society that judges those people and won't accept them, that's wrong.
Especially if it's your child, you love your child, whatever. And if if they turn out like that, well, they're still the same person.
Love without boundaries.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think it's
absolutely.
very hard on these people who, particularly the ones that really are born like that, to be then excluded and kept out. But on the other hand, as Franklin said, there are people that flout it and make a big thing of it, and I think that's bad too. But there do seem to be a lot of them around nowadays.
My next visit to China.
Frank 带领着我们参观了他琳琅满目的照片集，一边看，他的妻子 Anne 一边给我们讲述了在八国联军侵华时期在中国居住的各种危险经历。